Thank you.
I agree with all of them.
This is the Warrant and Finance Committee meeting of June 3rd, 2014. Time in 6 p.m. We are on time tonight. First item, roll call. We do have quorum here, so we will move on. Okay, next item on the agenda here is approval of agenda. Looking for a motion on that.
So moved.
Do we have a second for that brief motion?
Second?
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to, presumably, correct me if I, to approve the June 3rd meeting agenda as written. All in favor? Thank you. Approval of minutes. We have 4 sets of minutes. I thought we were going to have 5, but it turns out that we did some approvals at the beginning of the year. So we have 4 sets of minutes, the 2 special town meetings, the school meeting for 2014-15 year, and the town meeting 2014-15. So the first one up is September 9, 2013. That's the first meeting of Warrant and Finance plus recommendation for the special town meeting warrant. And I'll accept a motion whenever you're ready. Certainly we can discuss whatever once we have it on the floor for discussion.
But you just make a motion to accept these minutes? Is that it?
Yes.
Minutes of the September 9th meeting.
September 9, 2013.
Okay, I'll do that.
Seconded.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to accept the September 9, 2013 minutes as written. And when you're ready, we can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
I frankly don't recall being at this meeting, but it says I was.
Yep.
Was I here?
Let's see, yeah, you made the motion to, seconded the motion to approve the agenda.
That's
so
what it says.
Either I was seriously making things up, or you were there.
I will take your word for it.
Well, that would have been the election of the chair and the vice chair. You were in,
Okay.
I presume you remember that one.
No, I don't.
No?
But that'll happen to you too when you turn 70.
Okey doke. Thanks for the warning. Of course, it's been happening already, so that's why I write things down.
Is there a suggestion that we move the question?
You ready to move on?
Question.
So moved. I have no problem.
No discussion? Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve September 9, 2013 minutes as written. All in favor, so signify. Thank you. Okay, 5-0, the motion carries. The second one is March 10th, 2014, and that's recommendations for special town meeting warrants.
This one I do remember, and I was there. We'll make a motion to...
Oh, that's funny, because according to this, you weren't.
I was there.
You didn't participate in any of the motions, but whatever.
Okay. Oh, it says members absent. It does. I wonder.
I make a motion, we accept them as written.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to accept the March 10th, 2014 meeting minutes as written. So you were definitely
Actually,
in voting for the stockpile and the, I mean, you recall
yes.
those discussions?
Yes, I do recall. those, actually.
Okay.
however,
Well, I mean, we're here to
Yep.
make corrections as desired.
we can check the tape if it's a vital issue. I will not make an issue out of it one way or the other.
Okay, so, how about on the contingency that I, get a copy of the tape and we'll take a look, and we'll see what we see, and I'll correct it as it becomes evident.
How about if we just pass it because it stands without objection,
Yeah, I hear you.
unless somebody objects to it?
I hear you, but I would say I object to it,
Okay.
because, I want it to be accurate.
Okay.
So if you feel that you were there, I will check it out.
That's my
I
recollection.
want it to be correct. So, we'll just take that as a contingency, that I'll check it out and see what the deal is with attendance.
So.
And if you were there, I will move you in the top part, and you'll be good to go. Otherwise, I'll let you, either way, I'll let you know.
Okay, all right.
Okay? Any further discussion on what's presented here?
I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to bring it up. I'm questioning like the abstaining that I did a lot here, because Tom and I had spoken about, that I really don't have to abstain.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so, and this was, Tom had mentioned a couple of meetings ago that as long as it's above board and is fully recognized what your relationship is, say, the road commissioner, that there is, a possible conflict depending on what your perspective is, but it's not under the table, it's above board.
In other words, as long as everybody knows the relationship or can reasonably establish the relationship.
Then
there
in
is
that
no
instance, you could vote on those articles.
So I don't have to
Well-
abstain. For the last 2 years, I have.
Having to is, I guess, arguable. So I've been serving as chair, and as far as I'm concerned, if there's a perception, in the wrong direction, I would prefer that be avoided as opposed to,
So what you're saying is basically when I abstain, I kind of take myself out of, there being any thoughts that there'd be a perception.
Yes,
Okay.
perception.
So probably it's the best thing to do is to abstain.
yes,
Okay.
it's a perception thing. And, we all represent whatever our perception or whatever our perspective is on the town. We all represent a subset of the town. We all have a private life. We all have, things that we like in the town or don't like in the town. We come to the table with those perceptions.
Yeah.
But some things are perhaps a little stronger than others in terms of, we'll call it possible bias. So, it was certainly my preference as chair that we avoid misperceptions.
Okay.
So that's why,
Yourself on topics if you vote.
that's why, we would have these little discussions ahead of time saying, are you okay with? I didn't want to shove anything down your throat, but I just wanted to make sure that you were
Yeah,
okay
no, you
with
did say that to me, yeah.
abstention, because, it's better, I think, doing that than not doing that, because you're just opening the floor to somebody saying, hey, how about,
Yeah.
and so,
And I prefer for that floor not to be open, so that's good.
and in prior years,
School board.
in prior years, we had a member who was a worker at the school, and he would abstain when it came down to voting on the maintenance department at the school, because he was employed in the maintenance department at the
Okay.
school, for the same exact reason, just to avoid those things.
That-
So it's not a pure legal
But I
thing,
was
it's,
under the impression from, I believe it was one of the selectmen, that I had no choice, that I had to abstain. So.
The Supreme Court of the state has ruled on this issue on several occasions, and in contrast to the way a lot of states deal with this issue, the Maine State Supreme Court has said repeatedly that as long as there is nothing concealed, okay, or as long as there is no effort to conceal a relationship, then you stand as a committee member. Now, an alternate way to deal with this, if there was an issue before you that you felt strongly about that you did want to vote on, would to say before you voted that I want it understood that I am related to or married to the road commissioner. Having said that,
Of District 1.
of District 1, right. And then, so you're revealing your position and move ahead. So do what you're comfortable with, basically, I would say. That's what I think.
No, it's good that we clarified it, because, like I said, I was under the impression that I could not, and then Tom said that, so I wanted it clarified. But I still probably would abstain, just because I don't want that. But it's
You know
because I
what?
didn't know that I had that choice. I didn't think I had the choice.
Has there ever been a close vote where you would have had to have voted?
I don't believe so.
No, I don't recall anything,
But I still want to know if I have a choice.
I don't recall a situation where it would have made a
Choice is
difference necessarily. Okay, so, oh, and incidentally, all the votes as I wrote them down as we were going through, totaled up to 6. So unless I got somebody who was supposedly here that wasn't here, I still think the 6 is right, but
Okay.
I will be double checking that.
You may be right. Don't rely on this.
I make it a point to be wrong at least once a week, so this might be one of those
Just
times.
once a week.
Yeah, at least. I have no maximum number.
Just a matter of principle.
Any further discussion on this one? All in favor of the motion to approve the minutes of March 10th, 2014 as written, so signify. Thank you. Oh, and this is conditionally as well, based on a review of the tape. And I'll just make a notation here
wonder
that that's
if I watched
conditional.
this
And
on
while I'm
TV.
doing that, I will look at the first one as well, because you say you weren't there for that. So, yeah, I mean, since I'm pulling tapes out of the archives, I'll look at both of them.
I'm not going to bet on anything with you, Paul.
Let's just leave the question open. March 25th, 2014. Okay, so this next one is March 25th, 2014, recommendations for the 2014 school meeting warrant. When you're ready, I will accept a motion on that one.
Motion we approve minutes as written.
I'll second.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded that we approve March 25th, 2014 meeting minutes as written. Feel free to peruse. So this one, we have a little bit of a non-standard thing going on in Article 5, and a bit of a non-standard thing going on in 12, and again in 14. At least as far as, let's see, let me just see.
I believe the
check
minutes
dollar
reflect
amounts.
the discussion,
I think they do too.
They do.
so that's what
What
they
do
are
you
supposed to do.
mean- What do you mean by what you just said, non-standard?
By non-standard, I mean
You didn't agree with
something,
everything?
something other than the same dollar amount as the school and something other than 5.0. In other words, things to draw one's attention. Not that it's wrong or right, merely not cookie cutter.
One of the $500.
Well, I have, oh, we can't do that yet, I'm sorry. I have a question.
Well,
Is it open to discussion now?
yes, I believe so.
My question is,
Yes.
when we discuss this, a lot of these things are already set up with the school budget, by the contracts already been established. Is there a way that we, thinking about it, that we should have a meeting before the negotiations go on? I've been looking at other districts and things that happen, and, if we intend to do anything but rubber stamp,
Okay, here's the way to proceed with this. And this can be done through the town, that the contract is written in such a way that only those portions of the budget that are funded, the school budget that are funded by the town meeting will stand. In other words, the selectmen did this in a very similar fashion when they put the contract together with Sanford. If you noticed, all the expenditures that are laid out in there are dependent upon the approval of the sovereign body, okay? And the town meeting can do it precisely the same thing with respect to any contract the school says. That's the town meeting's prerogative.
And to my knowledge, none of the school contracts at this time are written in that way. It certainly hasn't been brought to my attention that they are, and I have not been privy to see any of those contracts.
Well, I just think
Of course, I haven't asked for them
Yeah.
either, but that's a whole nother story.
we're given the budget, we really can't change it, so we're rubber stamping, and that's not that I want to make some more enemies, like I certainly did here. It was just on principle that, how I felt strongly about that. People on the planning board are not compensated. The volunteer boards are not.
Right.
Well, what's happened here is an issue that I was discussing with Paul a couple meetings ago, that the function and the process of the Warrant and Finance Committee meeting has changed over time. If you will recall, back in the 70s and 80s, the Warrant and Finance Committee started meeting in January,
Yes, we did.
putting together, okay, and working with, okay, not with the selectmen, with the individual elected department chairs, okay, who instrumentally are responsible to the town meeting, not to the selectmen, and that's important. And we are advisory to the town meeting, and each of the officers is hired by the town meeting, and the officers are responsible to the town meeting, okay? The selectmen have a role to play, and that's prescribed, but that was the process historically. And we are now find ourselves in a position where we get together after everything has been decided and processed and it's placed in front of us, and it doesn't give us a lot of flexibility. So, this goes to the issue of how we run the town. Are we a democracy or a managed government? You want managed government that's efficient, but it's not democratic necessarily. Okay. So, but that's an issue that the Warrant and Finance Committee may want to have with time. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we're halfway through our time here, so I'll try to
Right,
kind
better
of,
not get off in philosophy.
I'll try to curtail this a bit,
Getting
but
involved in the process a lot.
But the bottom line here is, I have been keeping track of, and I think I mentioned it at the school committee meeting, on my spreadsheet, I've been keeping track of what I deem to be mutable or immutable, things we can do something about. We've got the contracts, which are already done, and not much we can do about it. We've got the infrastructure that, we could cut that, but at your peril, your bridges fall down kind of a thing. And you've got the stuff that's maybe kind of open season, you can go up or down, and it's not going to necessarily bite you in the butt a year or two from now because you've been shortchanging things you shouldn't have been shortchanging. But for the 4 years that I've been doing this, it's been anywhere from, say, 89 to 93%, not much you can do. So I definitely agree with what you're saying. I will say, though, that I have found that the school committee is willing to discuss concerns, but certainly it needs to start early in the season. Taking that last meeting when we have all these very large numbers to go over, to start discussing something, it's not going to work too well.
I'll second what Paul says.
So
Yeah.
start, when they start meeting in December and January, and you start dragging out, here's the draft budget, that's when you raise your concerns. That's when you say, gee, I want to talk about this. And I have found them to be receptive to that, but just make sure it's early in the process.
The other thing.
But it is their warrant, ultimately.
The other thing I would suggest is that the town meeting does have the prerogative to refuse anything in the warrant that it chooses to, okay? The town meeting has to understand, if it's not funding a contract, that you may well wind up in court, but the town meeting does retain that authority, okay?
That is true, but that's another one of those at your peril things.
Right, that's an at your
So I don't
peril
really
thing.
see it happening, but if you can come to agreement, and it has happened a number of times in the past couple of years, if you can come to some agreement between the Warrant and Finance and the school committee, and it's not we'll call it a spitting contest, although I mean something slightly different. If it's not a contest between the two committees, and you can come to agreement in workshop, those numbers can come down for whatever reason. So, and it has happened, and it will happen.
I remember.
And it also happens at town meeting as well. Oh, gee, we found something after the last meeting, so here's the new recommended number.
I can't was, but there was one year that Scott presented to Warrant and Finance, and they shot him down on any special project. They just, no, and he did not go further with it. He could have brought it to the town meeting, but he didn't. He chose not to because Warrant and Finance was like, mm-mm. So, I mean, that made a huge difference there.
Well, just keep in mind,
With
this committee is advisory only.
Yeah, well, that year they seemed to feel like they were more than.
Well, but that's where the ordinance comes in. That's why I hand it out first thing every year, so we know what our job is. Our job is advisory.
Yeah,
That's it. Water cooler talk. Hey,
yeah.
what do you think about this article? And you tell them, and then they'll either agree with you or not, but it's very helpful to have that feedback from 5 or 6 people who were in the discussions, and, just to find out why they disagree, if they do. Anyway, I think we beat this one up. Is there any further discussion on March 25th motion?
Move the question.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of approving March 25th, 2014 meeting minutes as written, so signify. Thank you very much. The motion carries 5-0. Okay, May 20th, 21st, recommendation for 2014 town meeting warrants. I will accept a motion on that one.
Motion to accept the minutes of the meeting as presented.
Second?
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to accept the minutes as written. This one will be a little more in our minds. So again, just sort of scrolling down here, we have Article 6, which is other than a vanilla recommendation, 3-2. We have Article 11, approval, but 4-1. Article 18, approval, but 3-2. That was one where we reversed the motion, just for clarity. Article 23, 3-2. The red highlighting at that section where we broke for the following day. We recessed. Then some abstentions. Article 31 was a 3 in favor, 1 opposed, 1 abstention, just to keep things interesting. I think everything else was, we modified the recommendations on the donations. I'd also just like to, I assume that those of us who, actually most of us, were involved in that one. I've double-checked Article 40, the Warrant and Finance column, recommendation dollar amounts for donations. I believe they're reflective, I think they prove, and I think it's reflective of what we discussed for both motions. And the rest of them were 5-0s.
I read them while I was taking a break from the garden today, and I
I'm going to give you a double thumbs up for that one.
inclined to agree with your interpretation of the discussion.
Thank you.
Paul, I appreciate that you do send them ahead of time and that we can read them ahead of time.
Yes.
Thank you. I, for my part, appreciate when you read them.
You put a lot of time into this.
I did. But after you read it 4 or 5 times, it's like, So I actually, after I sent them out, I kind of went over them maybe twice more, and each time I found a couple little
You always do.
weird things.
Yep.
And what you're seeing in front of you now is the post any kind of editing.
Post weird thing.
Post weird things.
Post weird thing
Yeah,
events.
and largely, I think I found two sets of motions. I was like, where did I get those 2 people? It was these 2 people. And then like a couple of pieces of punctuation, but other than that, I thought it was in reasonable shape after the first pass. Any discussion? Any further perusal?
Looks good.
No, I think
Need any more time, Holly?
No?
Okay. All in favor of the motion to recommend approval of the May 2021 meeting minutes, so signify? Thank you. Okay, moving on. And so that's, the motion carries on all four of those. And I will consider the first two to be conditional, just for attendance purposes. Okay, moving on, no unfinished business, moving on to new business. We have no public, so we have no public questions, comments. Season summarizing remarks by Warrant and Finance Committee members. Basically, what I wanted to do here is just start off by saying, I don't expect to be on the committee, let's see, 25th, excuse me, 25 minutes past, we got 5 minutes. I don't expect to be on the committee next year. Just to let you know that in all likelihood, the vice chair will be having the first meeting of the next year, which would be you. Joan.
Okay, but I think you're very confused.
Yes?
With the statement you just made,
Okay.
because I'm sure we'd all very much like you to continue, because no one could do the job that you're doing. No one would want to do it the way you do it, because we don't know how to do it the way you do it.
I'll second that, and
Well-
Paul, I think you've done a good job, and from what I've seen,
Yeah,
I appreciate the vote of confidence. There are any number of good and valid reasons why I have opted to step back and see if I feel like stepping forward again at some point. Not the least of which is the amount of work and a certain amount of stress. I'd kind of like to see what my life was like 4 years ago before I had this thing hanging over my head.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Been there, done that.
Sure you do. So, and I also think that mixing up the chemistry of the committee is not a bad thing for the town. Just to kind of see if,
That
I don't know, I have my own way of doing things, and, you know, that may not necessarily be the best way of doing things, so just.
Doesn't matter the best way.
Just
It's a
mixing
matter of
things up.
involving people and changing it and experimenting.
And mixing it up.
That I
you know?
agree with.
I mean, I understand the whole concept of power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and, you know, I'm not interested in any of that stuff. You know, so anyway, that's my intention at this time, in my opinion, I believe. I will not be on the committee next year, but it doesn't preclude that, you know, at some point, something may change, either for this committee or for another committee. Who knows? But the big thing here is I want to make sure that, number one, I don't end up phoning it in, you know, because it is a lot of work, and that I don't get burned out. We all know that kind of the biggest, the pattern for committees in town, because it's the same people who are on all these things, right, is that you either fall out of favor in a small or large way, you die, or you burn out. And none of those really appeals to me. So that's kind of where my head is at this point. Anyway, so is there any other, were there things that worked or didn't work? I know we talked a little bit about some of what has happened in this past year. Is there anything else that needs to be aired or things that you'll want to do next year or not want to do, or?
I would like to get a copy of that school committee thing before we start up.
School committee thing.
The one where you cannot change, it's in the contract, you may change, or this.
Well, the thing is, if the contract is written, it all ties down to how the contract is written. If the contract is written with that clause that here are the people who negotiate, because there's going to be a subcommittee of the school committee, right? So 2 or 3 people on the school committee, typically 2, will be on one of these subcommittees. They'll negotiate, they'll sign on behalf of the committee, on behalf of the people of the town. And if within that contract, there's a clause that says subject to, then we're good. If it doesn't, then I would say the town is going to need to fund whatever it is, because there's nothing in there that says it's conditional. So that's kind of where it would stand. So I would say to you that if you bring that up to the school committee next year and say, oh, by the way, can we ensure that any future contracts have this clause in it?
Alternately, you can go to the town meeting and ask, demand that it be included in any subsequent contract. That's another alternative, if you wish. to
So if
proceed.
it's in an ordinance or something like that.
Right, or the annual town meeting, which applies for the duration of the year, but, I mean, there's a whole variety of options there. So don't ever get told that you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do the other thing, even by lawyers, because lawyers don't tell you law, judges tell you law, not lawyers. Lawyers are just advocates for clients, that's all.
Yeah. So any further? All right, moving on. No other business. Next meeting, there are no further Warrant and Finance Committee meetings for this season. The annual town meeting will be held on Saturday, June 14th, beginning at 9 a.m. in the Acton Elementary School gym. A copy of the warrant is available at actonmaine.org. I double-checked that today. It is there. And I'm looking for a motion for adjournment.
Before we adjourn, I'd just like to say, Paul, I want to thank you for your dedication to the town and performing this function for the past few years. I think you've done a good job under difficult circumstances, and having said that,
Thank you.
we wish
I
you would
appreciate that.
continue, but we also wish you a pleasant retirement or temporary retirement in any case, and we certainly understand the need.
We'll call it a respite.
Respite, okay, very good.
I'm feeling less stress already. So we have a motion. Do we have a second on the adjournment? Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
I was going to say.
Thank you.
I was going to say you're 3 minutes over, but.